There was absolutely no sign of trouble on this day. It was a clear, fine day. The sky was blue, and a light sea breeze disturbed the water surface and pulled the sails. The water sang whoosh. The girl with heavenly-colored eyes happily exposed her face to the oncoming wind. Isnelda was congratulated on her birthday. Delight in her eyes and sincere emotions of joy overwhelmed her. The man presented the girl with a box tied with a ribbon. It was her 12th birthday. Isnelda hastily accepted the gift. She held the box tightly, rejoicing at the gift from her parents, and her parents laughed with her. A three-masted ship with snow-white sails cut through the surface of the sea. Happiness seemed to be painted with a brush on the canvas by a masterful artist. And it was unclear whether such a joyful day would ever happen again in the girl's life. Suddenly, the water around became dark. The sky thundered. Lightning cut through the air. The waves hit the sides of the ship, showering its deck with thousands of splashes. The girl was trembling all over. From fear, her eyes filled with hot tears. She didn't understand what was happening. Through tears, she called for her mother. The captain of the ship, shouting above the noise of thunder and the howling of the wind, ordered Isnelda to quickly go to Dad. He pointed her in the direction. His silhouette stood out against the background of the flash of lightning. The man hurried the girl to quickly follow him. Already, when the girl stepped onto the deck, she tried to grab onto something out of fear. But her hand could not find support. She ran out of fear, not understanding where or why. She was overcome with panic. Another clap of thunder completely confused her. At this time, a lightning strike hit the bow of the ship. The waves lifted the ship, trying to capsize it. The ship swayed sharply on the waves of Isnelda, losing balance, falling into the raging elements. Soon she was already going down. Her luxurious dress with lace treacherously pulled the girl to the bottom. The lungs gradually filled with water. Her clouded mind wanted only one thing: to be with her dad and mom again. The last impulse of her consciousness was a call for help. And there was only a pressing feeling, as if her body was being squeezed from all sides. So the parents of the heroine of our story died on board the cruise ship Elahayo, and all her carefree and joyful life came to an end. Many people came to the funeral, but among them there were no those who were truly sad. The bell chimed monotonously. Ding-dong! People shared rumors that the ship was completely destroyed and none of its passengers or crew survived. 2 coffins covered with a lid stood in the middle of the spacious hall. Isnelda was wearing a black dress. She was heading towards the coffins, and the people around her were whispering. They were surprised that the girl did not shed a single tear. After all, her parents died, and she behaves like a heartless child. Others thought she was simply in shock. People reasoned that the heavens were merciless. The girl's father took care of orphans, and his only daughter was orphaned as a child. But if he was a commoner, where did he get the charity? There was a rumor that it was only a matter of time before he was promoted to maester. It was said that he was a candidate for a position in the magic tower. A single man sat down next to the orphan. He asked the girl in an uncharacteristically gentle and insinuating voice to tell her uncle everything. He asked her if her father had time to say anything before he died. He claimed that he could not leave without passing on anything to his family. The girl was silent. The man squeezed her shoulder and pulled her towards him. She stuttered and insisted that she did not remember much of what happened during the shipwreck. The man asked not to tell him that she didn't remember. He shook her firmly by the shoulder and spoke firmly so that she would remember everything carefully. Uncle said that if her father left a large inheritance, or at least secret books, then he will take her to him, and she will be able to live in complete prosperity. The child's face expressed fear. Her eyes and mouth were open. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she herself was trembling slightly. The man continued to hold her shoulder painfully with his hand. The uncle called the girl by name, bringing her out of her frozen state. She began to repeat, "I don't know," over and over again. She covered her head and ears with her hands and began to whimper. 2 men and a woman surrounded Isnelda on all sides. They asked the little girl not to close herself off from them, but to tell them everything. They were sure she heard something. They asked her who she decided to live with, but she decided for herself that she had had enough for today. She didn't want to listen to anyone anymore. Against the wall, one man held another by the collar and threatened to strangle him. Uncle understood that he knew nothing about the inheritance. The first one asked what the child was asking about. The men caused a commotion around them. Two priests walked along the carpet and carried a vessel with water and incense for the funeral ceremony for the dead. Suddenly, the younger one accidentally knocked the vessel with sacred water out of the hands of the priest, and it overturned. Water dripped from Isnelda's hair. She was sitting in a puddle of water, all wet. It was just some bad luck that began to fall on her like a lump. The priest, worried about the girl, asked if she was okay, and people around began to whisper. Our heroine's heart began to jump out of her chest. The water scared her to death. She felt herself in the sea waves that threatened to cover her headlong and swallow her into their worlds forever. At some point she could no longer breathe, and she began to call for help. Having realized a little that this was just a panic attack, the girl ran away from the Hall of Farewell to the dead. She was in a hurry to get out of here as soon as possible. It seemed that the chains would envelop her and squeeze her chest with such force that she would no longer be able to breathe. Her body was becoming heavy. It was as if forged chains were attached to her legs, preventing her from taking a step. Two men and a woman stood in a separate group. They heard the sound of falling and all at once turned their heads in that direction. Isnelda fell to the floor, but it was at that very moment that a man appeared. He stood next to her and extended his hand, offering to take her. Then everything happened as if by magic. The girl extended hers in response, looking at the man with wide blue eyes. The blonde asked Isnelda if she was okay. He was wearing a blue suit with a gray raincoat. The orphan stood up. She now looked trustingly into the man's eyes, and he asked her forgiveness for being late. Isnelda found his paleness strange, although he looked as if he had just run. The man got down on one knee in front of the girl. Water was still dripping from her dress. He rummaged around in his inner pocket, pulled out, and handed her a fairly large stone, the color exactly like her eyes. And when the mineral on the chain lay in the man's palm, butterflies with blue patterns on their wings suddenly began to flutter around. These butterflies began to circle around the child. She forgot about everything in the world and rejoiced at these bright, light, and fragile creatures. One of the insects landed on Isnelda's finger. The girl instantly felt calmer in her soul. She expressed delight at the sweet creature. The man was attaching a chain with a blue stone to the child's hair. She was a little afraid of his clear and confident movements. And soon Isnelda had a decoration on her hair. The man said that this was his birthday present to her, but she didn't even know who this person was. The girl remembered that her dad had dinner with this gentleman several times. He asked her to stand here for a while, and he asked me not to say anything, no matter what happened. The blonde hugged the child to himself. I asked him not to interfere, but the girl's uncle was rapidly approaching them. He said rudely, "Hey, you." The man introduced himself, Noah Azent. He insisted that he came to say goodbye after hearing about the death of his teacher. The rude man stopped short. It turned out that this was the same guy who entered the academy from the Crunche orphanage. The blonde was holding out a scroll of paper, claiming that from now on he is obliged to fulfill the will of the late teacher. A pale man read out the last will of the deceased, holding a scroll in front of him. The girl's uncle simply could not believe what was happening. He shouted that he did not understand why he was acting as chairman of the fund. He did not agree that he would take the entire inheritance. He believed that this was unacceptable when the daughter and younger brother of the deceased were alive. He asked what would happen to Isnelda, and who will take care of her in this case. The blonde calmly asserted that his interlocutor, as the only blood relative, was simply obliged to take the orphan in with him. But he believed that this no longer had anything to do with the inheritance. The heroine's uncle clenched his fists. From rage, he could not answer at least something articulate. He attacked his late brother's student with aggression because he appeared at the wrong time to announce the will of the deceased. A huge, luxurious living room with an interior in white tones was complemented by a piano in the center of the same color. A small table was set for two. The girl was a little afraid and a slight trembling ran through her. The man sitting opposite asked Isnelda how she was doing. The blonde was wearing a snow-white suit today. His hair was perfectly styled and his hands looked well-groomed. He leaned back in his chair confidently. The girl smiled with only her lips. She told Mr. Azent that she was doing just fine. On February 22nd, 549, Yune's 20th birthday was, and also the day she buried her parents. And this man took everything from her. The waiter carried drinks on a platter. A knife was cutting a meat steak, dishes and cutlery were clinking. The restaurant was quite crowded at that time. Their table was richly set. There was a huge lobster in the center. Chicken, eggs, salads, appetizers, dessert, sauces, candles and candelabra. Everything indicated the wealth of the restaurant guest who ordered this table. The girl delicately cut herself a piece with a knife. She said that recently her older cousin Roel passed the exam to become a judge, and Sister Bella was all worried about the upcoming engagement. The man assured Mrs. Nelda that he was her patron and not someone else, and he would like to know if everything is fine with her. The girl confirmed that of course everything was fine with her. Mr. Azant asked whether her allowance was enough. He admitted that he had recently heard a rumor that her uncle, Baron Bontar, was having some financial difficulties. The girl brought a piece of meat to her mouth. She was surprised by what was said. After all, this is the first time I've heard about this. The man thought about it. There was a pause in communication. Only the cutlery jingled. The girl was deciding whether to ask Mr. Azant now. The man had a completely unreadable look. She doubted that this ice-cold man would fulfill her request. But now there was no one who could help her like he did. Noah Azant was one of the few wealthy people who earned his wealth himself. He was a commoner without ranks or positions. Moreover, this man did not spend the money on himself. He was such a righteous man that he served as deputy general manager of the Cruncha Scholarship Fund, which supports orphans. The girl understood that now only he could help her. She fiddled with the gloves on her hands from nervous tension. She admitted that she contacted him because she wanted to ask him for something. Isnelda reminded her that in a month she would turn 19 years old. From that day on, she will become an adult, and I would like to start earning my own living by asking him for a job. The man asked her why she was so eager to become independent as soon as possible. He looked at the girl over his glasses. Isnelda claimed that she did not want to hang around the neck of her uncle and his family. After all, they took care of her all these years. But from now on, she wants to support herself. I thought it would be right to find a job on my own. But since he knew many places in the capital, then she thought that he could give her good advice. The man argued that for such a young person who grew up in a noble family, it would be difficult to find a normal and safe job. He praised her for her good intentions. He asked if she had discussed this with her uncle. The girl assured that she was going to do this later, when he agreed to fulfill her request. The man put his fork down on the table. He clarified with the girl that for now, this was only her own idea. Mr. Azant promised to come up with something. He summarized that Isnelda wants to leave home in a month and become independent. I asked if she had any wishes regarding work. The girl claimed that she agreed to any job, but I wanted it to be stable and legal. I asked if I needed permission from my uncle. The man assured that he had no intention of offering her anything illegal, and since by that time she would be an adult, he did not need permission from her guardian. Mr. Azant concluded that exactly a month later, on February 22nd, on her coming-of-age day, he would be waiting for her here. And if she doesn't change her mind, he will then enter into a contract with her. Isnelda was surprised. She asked if it was true. And under what conditions will it be? The man was already getting up and pushing his chair back with a sound. He assured that there could be no conditions, but she should think in advance what salary would suit her. The girl pouted. She understood that her reputation as a curmudgeon had taken its toll. This was typical for most rich people. The man stomped towards her. He presented her with a box. He apologized that this time the gift was not made to order, and he presented her with gloves from the new collection of the Arsenova brand. Mr. Azant opened the lid of the box. In it, on a satin pillow, lay a pair of gloves of delicate color and fine workmanship. The man expressed the hope that she would like such an accessory. The girl picked up the gloves presented to her. They were made of snow-white thin lace. Isnelda thanked the man. She stated that she had never seen such beautiful gloves. I assumed they were very expensive. The girl pressed the box to her chest with a smile, and she modestly assured her interlocutor that he did not have to give her gifts every time. Plus, they're so expensive. It looks like my father was giving me a gift. She clarified that he looked old, but it just behaves the same way. And she laughed at her own awkward joke. The gloves were neatly folded back into the box by the girl's hands. The man asked Isnelda to try on the gift, wanting to make sure they were the right size for her. The girl smiled. She refused to comply with the request, assuring that this was a gift from Mr. Azant, and of course, they should be in time for her. She placed the package on the table with a thud, and asked Mr. Azant to convey her best wishes to Ed. Isnelda regretted that she could not come to the graduation ceremony, but she was very happy for him, and conveyed her congratulations to him with all her heart. The man promised that he would convey all her wishes in words when they met. He stood next to the table, not far from his interlocutor. Her heart was beating fast. The sky was painted scarlet. Evening time was approaching. The girl thanked Mr. Azent for agreeing to meet with her today. She politely said goodbye to him. The girl was already grabbing the gate to leave the establishment. But the man called out to her. He asked Mrs. Nelda if she was happy. She turned around at his question. The wind blew her long brown hair and clothes. The sky-colored eyes were sad. In her hands she clutched the handles of the gift bag. She answered, "Of course, Mr. Azent. I am very happy." Isnelda left the territory through the gate, and the man looked after her. He noticed her beautiful lace dress, branded package with a new pair of gloves. He was amazed at how beautiful and ideal a girl's life could be. Isnelda opened the doors of the house. In the hallway, the servants only turned their heads at her appearance. They each rewarded the girl with their sidelong and hostile glance. The girl said that she had already returned, and she thought to herself that she only had 1 month left to endure. And she promised herself that she could withstand another month of this hell, in the hope of being freed soon. A girl in a yellow dress and neatly styled hair in curls screamed. So that Isnelda gives her gloves, and she began to roughly pull them off her. Isnelda's arm was covered in bruises and throbbed with pain. She pressed her hand to herself. Senya Bantar mocked that this is what a girl needs. And behind her stood Bella Bantar, watching impartially. Our heroine, straightening her hair, smiled. She expressed regret that lunch had taken a little longer. Bella claimed that no one needed her excuses and no one would listen to them. She hurried her to take off her clothes and give back what she had taken. She assured that such a sight made her feel sick. Isnelda mumbled something and began hastily unbuttoning the buttons on her fur cape. She hurried her. But then the cousins noticed the package that was in the girl's hands. Senya asked what was in her hands, recognizing the package from Arsenoff, and she snatched it from her cousin's hands. Soon the blonde in the yellow dress was showing her lace gloves to her sister. She stated with a smile that they were just right for her engagement ceremony. The girl impudently asked Isnelda, would she deign to give them away? Reminding that she took their clothes today. Reminding her that this is not the only reason she is indebted to them, that she has been living in their house for a long time. I asked her how long she planned to stay here. The man watched them from the balcony. Bella claimed that there were rumors that her uncle was a great magician, and she was surprised that his daughter could be so useless. The girl walked away with a cape under one hand and a bag of gloves in the other, her head held high. Isnelda persuaded herself to be patient. After all, one day she will leave this place. The girl just now saw the man on the balcony. She asked her father how long he had been standing there. Isnelda also looked at her uncle. He looked at her absolutely coldly, as if she were empty. Senya claimed that she and her sister were just angels, that they allowed her to enter the house only for gloves. She shrugged her shoulders and said that this house, but she noticed that they were not listening to her. She glared at her cousin. She asked how she dared to ignore her, and she slapped her hard on the chest. I was surprised that the girl seemed completely deaf. Senya wondered where it was seen that people were ignored like that, and our heroine's eyes were already welling up with tears. She convinced herself not to cry. No matter how offensive it was, everything had to be endured. A girl in a yellow dress came up and grabbed the orphan by the collar, but the guy who arrived in time grabbed her hand. He ordered Senius to stop. It was Garrick Bantar, the older brother of this family. He had masculine features, green eyes, and a straight, pointed nose. The sister asked him to let him go, but he angrily told his sister to stop intimidating the girl. The blonde blamed him for his insolence, since he imagined himself to be a knight. I asked him why it mattered to him. The guy blamed his sister for making a lot of noise in the house, and turning to Isnelda, he kindly asked her if she was okay. He adjusted the ruffle on her shoulder. The girl pulled his hand away. She assured that his sisters were just playing a bad joke with her. She asked for his forgiveness, and assuring that she was already pretty tired today, she wanted to go and rest. At this point, Isnelda turned around and walked away, leaving her puzzled cousins in the hall of the estate. Senya was furious. She shouted after the orphan that she didn't live here for nothing, and she wanted her to get out of their house as soon as possible. The guy looked after her intently. Our heroine opened the doors to her dark room. The shadow of her body fell on her neatly made bed. Isnelda took out a small chest from under the bedspread. With a thud, she placed it on the floor in the middle of the room. With a deft movement of her fingers, she opened the hidden mechanism. The lid opened with a click, revealing neatly folded contents. The girl picked up a blue mineral that was once given to her by Mr. Azent for her birthday. She noticed that its color had changed. After all, before the mineral was a different color and shone much brighter. Xenia explained to her stupid cousin that this was a magic stone, and his energy simply ran out. Isnelda was sad about this, and the cousin assured that if the owner was a magician, the stone would still shine. She blamed the one for being so stupid. It was known that a true magician creates magic with his emotions. The magic stone absorbed the power of the one who held it, changing its color and radiance. If you could create such a stone and fill it with magic, you could become a genius, and no matter where you were, you could survive alone. Isnelda clutched the stone in her hands and pressed it to her lips. I asked him to respond, and give her the strength to leave this place. The girl was sitting on her knees. She told herself that she was fed up with the anger, sadness, and emptiness that overwhelmed her. She begged the stone to respond to her call, but the mineral remained dark and dull. The orphan grabbed the chain with the mineral and threw it forcefully into the far corner of her room. He rolled on the floor. Isnelda agreed with her cousin's words, that she is completely useless and incapable of anything at all. She lowered her head in despair and sat there for a while. It seemed to her that this hell would be with her forever. There was persistent knocking on the door of her room. The voice called her name, being sure that the girl was in her room. She flinched in surprise. The tears had not yet dried from her eyes. The guy told Isnelda that it was him. The girl went to open it. The doors creaked as they opened. Older cousin Garrick stood on the threshold. Crossing the threshold, he chuckled contentedly, as if to himself. He kept his hands in his pockets. Isnelda became wary. She asked Garrick what he was doing here. He brazenly declared that he could be anywhere in his father's house. He asked the girl's opinion if this was his home. She was shaking all over. She insisted that this was not what she meant at all. The guy smiled. He said that his father would like to talk to her. Isnelda reported that she needed to change clothes. After all, these were Bella's clothes, and so she was in a hurry to return it to its owner. She promised to come down soon. The office was dimly lit by a single lamp on the table. There was also a pen, books, notes, and various business papers. The wall cabinet was full of collectible books. The girl asked her uncle for permission to enter. The man was smoking a cigar. He was aware that his niece was meeting with Mr. Noah today, and he was surprised that he learned this from third parties. Isnelda confirmed his words. She claimed that they were just having lunch. The uncle accepted her excuse. The girl decided to talk. She told her uncle that she really needed to tell him something, and she told them her decision to start an independent life without burdening them with her presence anymore. The man slammed his palm on the table. He raised a finger for emphasis. He said that she was talking nonsense. I was surprised at her statement to leave forever and live on her own, although she still can't do anything on her own. Isnelda was sure that children, having matured, no longer needed the supervision of their elders. She expressed her gratitude that he raised her until then, but she could no longer depend on him. Our heroine's uncle held his forehead with his hand. He assured his niece that she was talking about what she did not know, that the world is not so simple. Isnelda's eyes were red. She didn't know what to answer her uncle. And she understood that it didn't work out for her. He doesn't even want to hear her. Meanwhile, the man had already put out his cigar on the ashtray. I told my niece that she should stop with nonsense and get ready to go out into the world. He said that he wanted her to attend the ball on the occasion of the debut of his daughter Xenia. He was going to introduce his niece as a young acquaintance of his family. The head of the family complained of a headache. He specified that the event would take place the day after her birthday. The girl was surprised that she was debuting as a commoner. The uncle assured that no one cared about this. But then his youngest daughter burst into them. She was categorically against her cousin being sent along with her to her own debut. The man scolded his daughter for listening outside the door again. He asked her when she would start acting like a noble lady, but Xenia stated that in her opinion, this is not the most important problem now. The girl was hysterical like a little girl. She screamed that she wanted to debut alone, and he doesn't want the presence of his orphan cousin at all. The man had a hell of a headache. He held her hand, and he ordered both girls to shut up and get out of his office. Soon the door slammed behind them. Sanya was beside herself with anger. She demanded that her cousin return to the office and say that she would not go to the ball. She claimed that she did not want to see her on such an important day for herself. Isnelda assured her that she herself did not understand how this happened. She swore the truth of her words. The blonde asked her not to make her laugh. She believed that she was probably asleep and saw how to annoy her. She tried to shame her cousin by shaking her finger. Sanya adopted an arms-to-sides pose. She argued that if she could bring him, then so be it, she would allow her to come. The girl did not understand who they were talking about. The blonde reproached Isnelda for being slow-witted. She meant Edwin's soul. She asked him to invite her to the debutante ball. The girl recoiled. Sanya heard that the guy will soon graduate from the academy, and he was almost already a knight, a promising and wonderful knight from the Crunche Foundation. And her dream was to receive a ring from him at her graduation ceremony. The girl believed that if this happened, she would become the most famous debutante this year. Just the thought of it made her happy. But Isnelda was not sure that she could convince the guy. Isnelda considered this to be in bad taste, but her cousin informed her that she was now in no position to refuse her. The orphan did not want to invite her childhood friend, because she did not want to show Ed what she had become now. Sanya grabbed the girl by the hair and began to shake her. She shouted that she did not dare ignore her request and mock her. Isnelda asked to let her go, saying that she was in so much pain. She struggled, but her foot accidentally slipped. At that moment, the guy pushed the offender. He shouted at Sanya that she was up to her old ways again. My sister was indignant that he was constantly crawling out from somewhere and disturbing her. She suggested that he leave. Garrick broke up the girl. He kept his cousin under his protection. The sister continued her verbal attacks on him. She suggested that he stop popping up everywhere. She said that he was superfluous here. She was pointing her finger and telling the guy to leave now. And Isnelda warned that if she did not invite Edvin, then she might regret it greatly later. Isnelda exhaled excess emotions. She felt tired, and I wanted to lie down as soon as possible. Garrick asked the girl if she was still in touch with Edvin. His face was distorted with a contemptuous grimace. Our heroine's heart jumped out of her chest. She pressed her bruised hand to her chest. Isnelda and Garrick stood on a wooden platform, and the waves splashed below. The girl begged him to stop. Behind them stood the guy's 3 friends. The cousin held the envelope casually. He told the girl that he would give her the letter only if she went into the water. He asked what was unclear to her. The girl looked at the splashing waves. Trembling began to hit her body. Goosebumps ran down her spine. It seemed as if steel chains were enveloping her body. She began to whimper. The guys on the shore laughed at her. One said that she was a complete fool and couldn't even get into the water. Another insisted that all the girls couldn't swim. The third one found her quite cute when she started crying. The guys suggested that Garrick open the letter. They wanted to know why the girl was so embarrassed. Another said it must have been a love letter. The girl asked the guy not to do this, shaking her head. The cousin's eyes lit up with an evil light. He asked why he had to listen to her stupid requests. He quickly tore the envelope and began to read. I was very surprised by the photo you sent. Only 3 years have passed. It turns out that boys grow up so quickly. I'm glad that everything is fine with you in the capital. The girl mentally asked him to stop. After all, these were the memories they shared with Edvin, and no one else dared to read it. She yelled at him to stop. Garrick thought it was a very fun activity. Clarified where he stopped. I'll send you a photo of myself, too. The guy furiously tore the paper. He shouted that she was crazy with such and such a face to send her photos to her friends. He asked that if she let her braids down and walked around making eyes, then she imagined herself to be someone significant. He grabbed the girl by the hair and began to hold her so tightly. The girl said that she was in pain and asked to let her go. The guy offered her a choice: either she jumps into the water or cuts off her hair. He pulled her scalp back, causing pain. He assured that if she chooses the second option, he will personally cut her hair beautifully. That she will forget how to send photos to all sorts of bastards. Suddenly, the girl already had a short ponytail, and the guy rudely asked her whether she had sent letters to that bastard. He barked that another bruise on the other arm would bring her to her senses. Isnelda rubbed her wrists. She timidly replied that she had not sent it, that Sanya misunderstood her, that she was so busy that she didn't even have time to think about Edwin. The guy quickly closed the distance with her. He stood over her, looming menacingly like a rock. The girl involuntarily shuddered. Garrick ordered her to be quiet. He leaned his hand on the wall behind her. He assured that in any case there was no one in this house who would take care of her except him. The girl nodded her head obediently. The guy waited for her to say that she understood. He liked it when she was obedient. Therefore, I decided not to raise my hands against her. He grinned contentedly. The girl came to her room staggering from fatigue. She just collapsed on the floor next to the bed. Tears fell from her eyes. She made an effort, tried to hold them back, and wiped them away with her fist. The chest was peeking out from under the covers. Garrick then came so suddenly that she hid him under the bed. But if someone had seen her chest, it is unlikely that she would have escaped punishment. And now she reproached herself for carelessness. She held in her hands the first letter from Edwin. 7 years ago, after the crash that took her parents away from her, Isnelda had to part with her only friend. Edwin was the grandson of the old woman Eartha, who worked in their house. But when the girl moved to the Banter family, Mr. Azent helped the boy enter the academy. The girl thought that it would be good if she could go to study with him. After the fund began to be managed by Noah Azent, a student of the girl's deceased father, standards for orphan support have begun to return to prioritizing ability. And in order to receive worthy support, one had to have outstanding talents. But Isnelda had no abilities. Therefore, even for her, the daughter of the general director, they could not make an exception. Our heroine reread a friend's letter. He wrote, "Hello, Isnelda. I just returned to the dorm after the commencement ceremony. My neighbor is still a thorn, but fortunately it does not divide people according to their position in society. Right now, he is standing behind me and pestering me with questions. I apologized that I would finish my letter here today. In the letter, he promised to keep his promise to her. He will definitely come to meet her when he becomes a knight. I asked him not to forget and be sure to wait." Ed wrote to Isnelda very often, but for a year now she had not received his letters. She thought that if something had happened to him, Mr. Azent would certainly have told her. Perhaps I was busy or just forgot it. Sometimes the heroine imagined that the guy appeared like a prince riding a horse and saves her from this hell. After all, he was her first precious love. The girl sat and cried, pressing the envelope to her face. The girl, having cried, lay in bed on a pillow covered with a blanket. Suddenly, there was a knock on her door. The voice asked Isnelda to open the door. The door lock clicked. The silhouette of a guy appeared at the threshold of the room. The 2-room apartment was surprised by his arrival. Garrick was carrying food on a tray in his hands. He said that since she didn't come down for breakfast, he brought her a snack. The girl glanced at the tray. There were scrambled eggs, sausages, broth, and bread. She thought that this was a new reason for the guy to come today. Isnelda expressed regret that she did not feel well today. He realized that the girl was making him angry again. He brought everything to her right here. I was surprised that it was difficult to simply accept food from him. He asked the girl why she was taking so long to break down. I was surprised that she was still upset with him about his wrist. The girl only swallowed nervously in response. The guy assured her that if he had known that a woman's wrist was so fragile, he would not have squeezed it so tightly. And tears flowed down her cheeks. He blamed the fact that she was spinning around then. That's why it all happened that way. And the girl remembered a bouquet of flowers lying at her feet. He claimed that he was told that she would attend Senia's debut with her. Isnelda replied that most likely everything would be like that. Garrick suggested in this case, why not go together as partners? The girl asked him again. He claimed that she was a commoner, so he wasn't even sure. After all, it would probably be a shame if a young girl debuts without a partner. Therefore, the guy was ready to go with her, assuming she doesn't have anyone in mind anyway. The girl became sad. He barked at her why she wasn't answering. He was angry that his offer to go together did not suit her. She stuttered a little and argued that everything was not so simple, that she already has a partner. The guy asked what kind of joke this was. He couldn't remember her being close to any of the guys, and he doubted that it was Roel. The guy had already raised his fist over her. Isnelda took small, careful steps back. She answered, "Of course not." And I tried to come up with something for myself. After all, Garrick should not have gone with her. She needed a convincing excuse. And then an idea struck her. She said that Mr. Azent would go to the ball with her, that Noah Azent would be her partner. The man told his father that Senia's debut would cost them a lot. It was Roel Bontar, the eldest son of the Bontar family. He said that, in addition, The business in which they had recently invested was suffering losses. He advised me to reduce expenses for the evening. The father told his son not to make him laugh. I advised my son to ask Mr. Azent to give the girl an allowance for the next month. Roel asked him if he had clarified this question earlier. He spoke into his father's ear that the amount of Isnelda's monthly allowance was more than 2,000 mer. With this money, you could buy a title. But all this will end when the girl comes of age. In addition, she still had no idea about the amount of her benefit. And if it comes up one day, it will be bad. The father yelled at his son. He also blamed his brother for giving his entire inheritance to Azen. That his brother became a magician and became an assistant professor at the academy. And before becoming master of the magic tower, he died on the way to his daughter's birthday. After all the guardianship money and benefits would have been his if his brother had remained alive. He considered Isnelda to be responsible for the death of his brother. He thought that she should be grateful that she was sleeping under his roof. The son blamed his father for talking to Isnelda about her debut. After all, her dress alone was worth it. The man believed that the niece went to face her father, even if not completely. He asked his son if he understood what this was about. Roel clarified what his father meant. The man was surprised how he with such brains was going to lead the whole family. He asked how many people he thought were waiting for the girl to grow up. He said that Mr. Adlon was ready to pay a large sum. He showed the letter, waving it. The man did not want to let her become independent. But even if she left, I was going to ask her for every single coin for raising him. He believed that if Mr. Azent found out about everything, problems would arise. After all, having heard that the girl whom he patronized was suddenly married off, he could understand everything very badly. He told Roel to watch and remember what his father was doing. The guy stood stretched out as if in a stance. The man argued that the goose that lays golden eggs should not be hastily disposed of. Mr. Noah Azent was sitting in the scientific office, leaning on the back of an upholstered chair. A table with manuscripts, holograms, everything indicated a working process. A young guy came in to him. It was Jerry, Noah's chief secretary. He turned to his boss. In his hands, he held a folder of business papers. Jerry reported that rumors were circulating, that Baron Bantar is going to arrange the marriage, but his daughter Bella already had a groom in mind and was engaged to him. And Senia was not in a relationship with anyone. Noah said that everything was clear to him. He allowed the secretary to go, but he argued that it was impossible to leave everything to chance. Mr. Azent argued that Jerry simply had nothing better to do. The guy froze in place. His boss says that unlike some, he still has something urgent to do. I asked him to leave. When the door slammed, Noah sat down by the window and began to peer into it. It was raining outside. Soon he saw a lonely female figure in a cloak and hat. It was Isnelda. He remembered her as a little girl, so amazing and cheerful. And now her booted feet splashed through the puddles of the street. The shop door opened with the sound of a bell. A girlish voice said good day to Aunt Pidge. The woman glanced sideways at the newcomer. A young girl stood on the threshold. The woman greeted Isnelda. She was surprised, gasping how long it had been since she had seen her. The hospitable owner of the shop helpfully asked the girl if she wanted to order as usual. The girl asked for chocolate with grapes, and soon her hand slipped a bar of chocolate with 2 envelopes of letters under it. The girl thanked her in a whisper. The woman understood that the girl had a hard time. She wondered why the second son of such a family could not send a letter normally. Meanwhile, Isnelda wrote with a pen on paper. It was addressed to Noah Azent. In it, she asked him, if possible, to arrive a day earlier than the agreed time. She reported the unshakability of her decision. She also asked in the note not to worry about any gifts. The paper quickly ended up sealed in an envelope. The girl asked if any letters had arrived for her personally. The woman shook her head with a grimace. She assured that she told him that she would deliver any letter for her. But unfortunately, I never received one. The girl couldn't even imagine how busy Ed must be right now, because graduation would soon take place. The woman claimed that studying at the academy was not an easy task. Having clarified which corps the friend belonged to, she added that it was solid. The girl reported that they were coming from afar to invite the graduate, that the knight swore allegiance to the lady, and she entrusts her future to him if he gives her a ring with his name engraved on it after graduation. I thought it was romantic, like in fairy tales about knights. The girl sighed. Mrs. Pidge asked her if she still wanted to send the boy a letter. The woman advised sending a message just in case. Who knows, maybe this time the answer will come to her. But Isnelda thought that she didn't want Ed to see her like this now. I needed to look confident. Shine so that everyone can see how happy she is. After all, she had been an object of ridicule for everyone ever since Garrett cut her hair 4 years ago. Her cousins called her a stupid girl in love, but it was easy for her to endure insults directed only at her. But then people began to slander Edvan for writing her a letter. They said that the boy was simply lucky that they accepted him to study, and even gave him money. They thought it was strange that a hillbilly would study. Isnelda could not believe that it was her fault that people around her began to say such things about Edvan. Since then, the girl wrote to Edvan her fiction, for the sake of not seeing on paper only her former self. It was also to stroke my vanity. More than a year has already passed since she stopped receiving letters from her boyfriend. And today in a letter, she congratulated Edvan on his graduation from the academy. She expressed confidence that he would become an excellent knight. Isnelda sat with her head propped up over the paper, wondering what else she could write to her childhood friend. She sealed the envelope and handed it to Aunt Pidge. She assured the women that they could rely on her. The door made a Dylan, closing behind the shop visitor. The weather had already adjusted and the sun was shining. The girl unwrapped the chocolate bar and began to enjoy it. She couldn't get used to this strange taste, and she wondered if she would miss him when she left this place. A month later, the postman brought letters to the gate. He waved his hand for the owners to take the mail. Isnelda held an envelope in her hand. She smiled when she read who it was from. It thanked him for the invitation. They promised to look forward to the meeting. This was the response from Noah Azent. The hall was already full of invited people. Ladies in luxurious outfits and gentlemen danced, talked, and just had fun. The maid stood with a brush. Another was adjusting Isnelda's dress. The girl was in front of a full-length mirror. A hubbub was heard from below from the hall. The girl opened the door and looked out through the crack. The maid asked if the girl was waiting for someone, and she herself shuddered. The woman giggled and said that so much time had passed since the gentleman was so worried about the girl. Another claimed that today was an important day. She advised me to stop meaningless conversations and get to work. Isnelda walked and did not understand why all the servants were laughing so much. The maid spoke into the girl's ear. So that she doesn't worry. What will make her pretty? That Miss has blossomed like a bud that is time to be plucked. The girl did not understand what this meant and what it meant. The maid said that the girl did not have a single accessory, even gloves. Isnelda hesitated a little. She remembered the gloves, but Senia really wanted to wear them for the holiday, so she gave them to her. The girl reminded her sister that they were hers, that you should have at least asked. The eldest assured that they should have said this earlier, and now there was no point in making noise without a conscience. Isnelda then received an answer that the gloves had already been prepared for Senia. She thought there was no need to worry, and Mr. Azent shouldn't have been surprised if Senia bought the same pair. She also had more than one gift from Mr. Noah, but it would be a shame if she didn't wear one in front of him, and she thought what she should choose. Then her face lit up with a smile. Her hand took out a magic stone from a dull-colored bag. The girl held it on a chain in front of her. She thought that this was also a gift from Mr. Azent. With deft movements, she put the mineral on her hand like a bracelet. The maid was surprised how it was possible to wear such a childish trinket, but Isnelda believed that this decoration was perfectly suited for this situation, standing still like a doll against her will. The girl looked at the faded decoration. I thought it would suit her perfectly, the one who would become a laughingstock today. Sania was happy. She saw herself in the mirror and said that she looked just perfect today, like a sweet, charming aristocrat from head to toe. I thought that I would be just the perfect star of the evening. The girl was spinning in front of the mirror. After all this time she was so looking forward to her debut day. She remembered that these girls had been avoiding her a while ago. They called her a fake aristocrat who bought herself a title. But when they see her today, they won't even dare to squeak. Sania asked her older brother Roel what he thought she looked like. He clapped her and assured her that his younger sister was a real beauty today. He said that usually a relative is chosen as a partner, with a small age difference, and he asked if she really wanted him to accompany her, and not Garrick. The girl answered with disgust that what kind of bore was that brother, that he probably sits in the gambling house as usual, that he had nothing to do on this holiday. The brother reminded me that the debut was also for Isnelda. Sania was amused by how those two would dance. Roel whispered in his sister's ear that today the orphan would be accompanied by a special partner, but it was a huge secret for everyone. The girl screamed in surprise. She wondered how it was possible to marry the fat man Adlon, but her brother asked her to talk more quietly, that so far only they and their mother and father know. Sanya thought this was terrible. She knew that the man already had a wife. The man paused for a significant moment. The girl guessed that her father was simply paid for the orphan. She even felt a little sorry for poor Isnelda. Roel asked his sister not to say that everything was decided for the good of the girl. It was better for her than living in this house, listening to every rustle. In exchange, become Mr. Adlon's junior wife. Sanya told her brother that there was one problem. I thought that Garrick couldn't just take it for granted. Here the man became wary and turned his head towards the door. It seemed to him that someone was standing there and eavesdropping on their conversation. He asked, "Who is there?" But there was no answer. He ran out of the room but did not see anyone in the corridor. Roel reassured himself that this was nonsense, and a draft slammed the door. The girl hurried her brother to go down to the large hall, otherwise they might be late. The man told his sister to go ahead, and he was going to quickly check on his father and also follow her down. Senya asked him to return as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Isnelda was looking through the slightly open door at the guests in the hall, but she never saw a single blonde. But Mr. Noah Azent definitely said that he would come. She was surprised that he was still not among the guests. The girl was afraid that he might be busy and therefore could not come. The orphan was spinning restlessly. But then Cousin Senya arrived. She asked the girl to stand still so as not to drive her crazy. Isnelda turned her head towards her cousin and assured her that she was just thinking a little. She asked if she was going to the banquet hall. Senya argued that it was not proper for a lady to go out alone. She was sure that Roel would soon come to accompany her. Then she realized that the girl had no way of knowing the rules of good manners. She asked to be forgiven, snorting disdainfully that she was talking to someone who didn't even have an escort. Senya advised the orphan to ask Garrick to accompany her at worst. He would run like a darling, but the girl assured that she was fine anyway. Today's main debutante pressed her hands to her face, and Isnelda noticed how the gloves harmonized with her cousin, unlike herself. After all, in the future, a beautiful life awaited her as the daughter of Baron Bantar, and she herself will disappear from here at the end of today. The girl persuaded herself not to regret anything, that such gloves would not have suited her anyway. Her eyes filled with tears. Roel came in and asked his sister if his princess was waiting for him. She displeasedly asked why it took him so long. The elder brother asked him to forgive him. He claimed that now they could go out. As if by chance he noticed Isnelda that she was here too. He said that tomorrow she too will become an adult. The girl was surprised, and the man smiled at her and expressed his congratulations. The girl said that she was surprised that they remembered her birthday. Isnelda thought that no one remembered this. Senya assured that everyone remembered, that afterwards they will celebrate it with dignity with the whole family. And now she reminded them that it was time for them to leave. The eldest cousin walked away arm in arm with Senya into the large hall. The door opened in front of them with a creak, and Isnelda felt somehow uneasy. The older cousin wished her a happy birthday, which no one has remembered for the last 7 years. And when someone is unreasonably kind, he could be up to something evil. A man in a servant's uniform was telling Miss that it was time for her to go out too. The girl caught herself and involuntarily shuddered. But he grabbed her hand. The girl was seriously scared. The man claimed that these doors were not for her. He offered to follow him. They walked along a long and dark corridor. Isnelda found it strange that the servants called her Miss and asked her to follow them. It was strange why they suddenly decided to become polite. She also noticed that this corridor did not have access to the hall where the banquet was taking place. She doubted they were heading there. The man turned to the girl. He said that today she would enter through a special entrance, but she didn't remember that there was anything like that in this house. The man convinced her otherwise. Isnelda thought that she was being convinced of a lie. After all, although she was not considered a member of the family, she lived here for 7 long years. She studied this mansion inside and out so that she could go out without Garrick noticing. And now the girl had a bad feeling. She thought that if she allowed them to take her away, something bad would definitely happen. The girl slipped and fell awkwardly. The man asked if she was okay. She assured that she was safe. "I'm just a little unaccustomed to walking around so much in such a long dress." The servant offered to help the girl get up. He extended his hand to her. The girl looked at him with her heavenly-colored eyes. When she was already standing, the man was still holding her by the wrist. The girl thanked him and tried to free her hand. The man involuntarily blushed. While he was coming to his senses, the maids were fussing. Our heroine, lifting the hem of her dress, ran away along the corridor as best she could. The servant shouted, "Catch her!" Isnelda rushed like the wind. She realized that she couldn't let them catch her. Sweat dripped from her face. The servants were hot on her heels. The man saw the girl run into the room. He opened the doors, but he did not see the girl in the room. He started cursing. He said that he would turn everything upside down here. Another servant called the elder that he saw the open door. He promised to come there soon. And our heroine sat trembling with fear under the window of that room from the outside. She saw and heard everything through the glass. Hearing retreating footsteps, she caught her breath. Isnelda wondered who gave this order. Judging by the fact that Roel suddenly congratulated her on her birthday, he definitely knew something. The girl was sitting in the garden thickets. She understood that she could not go to the banquet hall in this state, and if she ran away, she had nowhere else to go but Aunt Pidge's shop. But her uncle could have harmed her. Therefore, it was impossible to go there. In the end, all that remained was to find Mr. Azen, the one who appropriated her inheritance and all these years got by on a penny allowance. The girl knew that Noah Azent was at least a man of his word. He could ensure her safety until he fulfilled his promise to her a month ago. She decided to quickly get out of the mansion. I decided to pick up my things first, and I also needed to change into comfortable clothes. She quietly walked up the steps. Isnelda was alarmed by the broken handle of the door to her room. She opened it carefully. The door below was also damaged. The creaking of rusty hinges made her reveal her presence. The guy immediately saw the girl. He called out to her, not even surprised that she had appeared. In his hand was a long and thick pole. The girl asked Garrick why he was in her room, and what could all this mean? The guy was holding a piece of paper in his hand. It was only then that Isnelda noticed the chaos around. And most importantly, her secret chest was broken into, and its contents were damaged or simply lying on the floor scattered throughout the room. The cousin took one of her letters from the chest in his hand. He argued that he should have asked her the same thing. He furiously yelled at her, asking why she had packed her things. The evening was already lighting up the stars in the sky. A young doorman boy stood near the central gate of the Baron's estate. Suddenly something creaked. The boy guessed that it was a magical carriage he rode even without a horse. The doorman did not think that their Baron's banquet would be attended by a noble guest, worthy of traveling on such a vehicle. Meanwhile, Mr. Noah Azent himself was leaving it, slamming the door behind him. The boy stuttered a greeting in his uniform. I asked the guest to give his name and family. The impeccably dressed blonde identified himself, but the doorman did not find him on the list. He asked for forgiveness and asked him to name his land holdings, and he immediately undertook to check everything. Mr. Noah maintained that he did not own the title. The boy was surprised. Noah Azent claimed to be a commoner. The doorman said that the guest's name was not on the list, and he said that here he was simply powerless. He asked if he had brought an invitation with him. Mr. Azent found it rather strange that the secretaries did not inform him of any invitations from the Baron, so I thought it might just get lost somewhere. I didn't believe that the Baron could not invite him. He claimed that last month he increased the allowance at his request, and he was surprised that the Baron apparently did not know gratitude. The guy at the gate was dumbfounded. A chill went down his spine. Meanwhile, Senia was approaching, accompanied by her brother Roel. She asked who this attractive gentleman was. She told Hay that if a guest came, his task was to let him through. I asked what he was doing here, and she began to sweetly tweet with the blonde, expressing her joy that he came to her debut evening. Senia abruptly approached the man. Noah asked why she was doing this. It was rude to act like that when you were too close. He asked if he could find Miss Isnelda Crunch. The girl asked why he needed this girl, that she must be getting ready. She asked how she knew everything herself, and the cold gaze of Mr. Noah gave me goosebumps. Our heroine looked at her cousin like a rabbit at a boa constrictor with the eyes of a victim, driven into a corner. There was confusion and fear on her face. Garrick was angry. The furrowed brow and the gathered wrinkle on the bridge of his nose spoke of his state of mind. The cabinet drawers were open and their contents were partially hanging from them. The guy asked if she knew that his father and sisters were planning something. The guy was sure that Isnelda herself did not want to be married off. He stepped with his boot on a group of envelopes that had been stored in the chest and were now scattered on the floor. The girl asked him again. She asked where he heard that. The guy insisted that Roel had somehow let slip a word. He believed that there was something generally wrong with this family. They argue among themselves, but they consider him an idiot. Garrick wondered why the girl didn't tell him that right away. He reminded her that she could ask him for help if something like this happened. The guy insisted that he was scratching his head all the time and thought that she wanted to run away from them. He could not imagine how much she must hate this marriage. He told her not to be afraid and to count on him. Isnelda insisted that she did not fully understand what he was talking about with her. The feeling of frozen blood in her veins, the clanging, deafening noise in her ears, did not allow her to understand the meaning of his words. Garrick, putting his hand on his heart and smiling, told the girl that now he understood, that it was worth helping her escape a long time ago. It was all because she liked him. The girl got goosebumps. The guy understood that this was precisely why she did not want to marry this pig-like Adlon, and he assured that now everything was cleared up. He told the girl to get ready, inviting her to run away together. Isnelda clutched the hem of her dress and her hands trembled. Garrick wanted her to answer him. The girl asked him to wait and suggested that he calm down a little. He demanded to know whether he was right in his guesses. The guy swung at the orphan. She sat down and covered her ears and head with her hands. Her heart was about to jump out of her chest. She said that you definitely need to run away from here. The girl was afraid of Garrick. 7 years ago, when she first came to her uncle's house, he put a centipede in her clothes because she ate one of his 8 lollipops. And 5 years ago, he brought her to some alley for a showdown between bandits. Then he left her and ran away. The girl was then able to return unharmed with difficulty. But no one opened the door for her, and she spent that night silently waiting at the gate. And no one at the estate noticed her absence. 4 years ago, Garrick's friends also joined in the persecution. Then the 4 of them attacked the girl, and what this led to was forcing her to cut her hair. 3 years have already passed since the guy began to blush while laughing at her hair, and his attitude towards the girl changed. Even touching her neck confused his thoughts. He no longer hit her like when they were children. He just grabbed with force and threw things around. Isnelda believed that if she endured everything and smiled, she would somehow survive. For some time, the guy remained happy and behaved friendly. Now he assured her that he was affectionate, so if she doesn't give him reasons to be angry, everything will be fine. And hugging her shoulders, he brought his face closer to hers. The guy told Isnelda that if she was with him, she could be calm. He kissed her on the head, and the girl understood that it was all her fault that she grew her hair, that they saw her face, that his heart fluttered. It was her fault that she received expensive gifts from Mr. Noah. In this house, she simply existed because she continued to live. The girl had tears welling up in her eyes. She reminded the guy that they were cousins. He shook his head and assured that he knew how she felt and what she was worried about. Garrick assured her that there was no need to worry about it now. He suggested escaping to Langrad. In that empire, marriages were even made between cousins. The girl felt her hands chained. She clenched her teeth tightly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her hands clutched the hem of her dress. She spoke, perfecting every word. That she never told him she liked him. Garrick assured that she never told him that she didn't like him, and he smiled carelessly. He claimed that he understood everything without words. After all, she was always timid and silent, but she always smiled at him. Isnelda felt like chains were shackling her chest and entangling her entire body. The guy grabbed her hand tightly. He said that he was not so ignorant as not to guess anything. The girl asked him to wait. The cousin was sure that the girl wanted to make him jealous with that letter to Edwan. Although her habit of flirting with guys infuriated him, he was ready to forgive her. He assured that they would get married soon, and all she needed was to admit her mistake. The girl saw around her only a tangle of clanging iron chains. Isnelda told herself that she couldn't let those words break her. She began to cheer herself up. It wasn't her fault or it didn't matter, so I should have just apologized and kept smiling. The guy held her by the wrist, and her hands were shaking. She told herself that she needed to do everything as usual, that you just need to endure and live another day like today. Tears dripped onto the floor from the girl's eyes. She asked herself how long she could endure all this. She didn't want to continue to suffer like this. After all, in fact, up to this moment she had to endure so much. She asked herself why she was doing this. She did not see where her fault was. The guy asked why Isnelda was crying. I assumed she was doing this out of joy. She asked him again. Garrick believed that his cousin was simply feeling emotional and smiled carefreely with all his teeth. But the girl told herself that after everything it was only her fault. She loudly begged Garrick to move away from her, wrenching her hands from his grip. The iron chains cracked and bent from the efforts of her will. The guy asked her dumbfoundedly. Isnelda repeated that he should leave her, that he disgusts her. Her eyes sparkled. The girl protested, because she never said that she liked the guy. She insisted that she did not belong to him and he would not be able to push her around as he pleased. Her hands resisted the grinding chains. Isnelda asserted in a firm and decisive voice that even if Garrick were not her cousin, she still would not have married someone like him in her life, even if it was a matter of her life. The guy shouted that she seemed completely crazy, but our heroine looked down at him with clenched fists. She screamed that he himself was crazy. Raz considers her a stupid person who is unable to fight back. For the first time, she openly expressed her opinion in person. She said he was right, that she's leaving, but now she won't do it in secret. After all, what did she have to run away from? She was going to leave here with her head held high. Isnelda said no, she screamed in his face that she decided so, and such was her will. Garrick ordered the girl to calm down. He threatened that one more word from her and he would not allow her to leave here. She replied that she didn't care what he said. She will leave here through the front door and on your own feet because that's what she wanted. The guy swung his hand at his cousin. He yelled at her to shut up and shut the door. His emotions turned into uncontrollable rage. He grabbed her hands and held her tightly. The girl screamed and struggled. The mineral from her bracelet was in front of the guy's face. Suddenly, scarlet blood sprayed out. The guy's pipe fell out of his hands, clattering on the floor. The guy held his face and swore at the girl, calling her a bitch. He saw blood on his hands. He shouted at Isnelda, how dare she hurt him? He called the girl trash. Then he began to threaten her that she was already finished. But Isnelda threw her head at his side and knocked him over onto his back. As he fell, the guy tried to grab his cousin by the hem of her dress, but she deftly dodged it. He stood up, staggering, and prepared to punch her. Isnelda tried to quickly figure out how to escape from the wounded and enraged Garrick. On the floor, she felt with her hand the pipe that the guy had previously held in his hand. Without thinking, she struck him in the temple. The guy staggered. His temple was cut into blood. Isnelda was not afraid. She was determined to fight back to the last. But her opponent fell and did not move anymore. Our heroine's hands were shaking. She prayed that Garrick would not die. But after looking closer, she realized that he was alive and had simply lost consciousness. Isnelda sat on the floor in confusion. The thought came to her that the guy might wake up soon. She thought it best to leave quickly even before he came to his senses. She quickly began to rummage around the room, picking up scattered things and putting them in the chest. Having put away her most valuable things, she decided that it was time for her to go. But she asked herself where she would go looking like this. This chaos in the room was similar to her internal state. She couldn't remove it, but that didn't matter. And no one will remove it but simply tear it into pieces. The girl sat with her face hidden in her knees and cried from moral fatigue of surviving like this all the time. There was a hubbub in the hall. Others admired and said to look who was walking there. Heels clicked on the parquet. The girl was sad. She felt those appraising glances on her again. The looks in which one could read that she was not welcome here, like stones on the pavement. She had already lived under these gazes for 7 years. She understood that she had nowhere else to go. After all, who will accept her like this now? But then she heard Senia's voice. The girl said that she bought them. I ordered it myself from the capital. Isnelda followed the voice, squeezing between people. The man assured her that he was just asking, and he thought that he shouldn't have been so angry with him. The girl asked for forgiveness. Mr. Noah Azent, and it was him, claimed that he was just curious. He assumed that the Baron was so poor that he had to send his daughter to her debut in factory ready-made products. The girl reproached him for implying that she looked like a beggar. It seemed like steam was about to come out of her ears. Mr. Noah claimed that he had seen hundreds of similar pairs of gloves, that the sight of them was already sickening. He asked for forgiveness if his words seemed rude. After all, he did not belong to the nobility. But he advised her to answer his question. Where is his companion? Mr. Azent was called by a girl's voice. Her heart was jumping out of her chest, her face was tear-stained. And on the hand, a heavenly blue magical mineral sparkled. The blonde turned at the sound of the voice and hurried to approach her. He covered her shoulders with his cloak. He said that he was going to get a search warrant. He claimed that he was glad to see her safe. Isnelda was surprised that he had been waiting here for her all this time, and she sincerely hoped that the man would not be offended by her for this. Mr. Azen asked the girl if she had been waiting for him. She looked up at him with her blue gaze in which one could drown like one in the sea. The man extended his hand. He took the girl by the wrist. Isnelda involuntarily took a step towards him, not understanding what she was doing. Mr. Azent gallantly kissed her hand. He said that it would be an honor for him to accompany her to this event. The girl's heart began to beat faster. Suddenly, the crystal on her hand began to gain color with several edges. Isnelda could not understand how it happened that the magic stone began to apologize before our eyes. The mineral began to sparkle and shimmer. The girl was surprised by this. After all, he had never responded to her before. She told herself that she could not awaken him because she herself was not a magician. Mr. Azent addressed the girl. He asked in a whisper in her ear. Could she say Tristella out loud? Isnelda did not understand and asked again. The man convinced her not to be shy, and I took it and tried it. He gently held her hand by the fingers. The stone completely turned a bright blue color. Our heroine gained courage. She took a deep breath as if she were about to dive into water, and she clearly said Tristella. Suddenly butterflies fluttered around her. A flash of light illuminated everything around. The banquet guests watched all this with their mouths open in surprise. And something unusual continued to happen around Isnelda. Butterflies fluttered, the glow went online, and very soon the girl was dressed in a chic blue ball gown, an open back, gold embroidery, and the color of sky blue. All this was complemented by a light fabric and a fluffy skirt. The girl herself was simply charming in her new outfit. Isnelda herself looked a little confused. In addition to her outfit, she also wore accessories for her neck, wrist, and hair with blue stones. And on her feet, her usual shoes were replaced by pumps with stones of the same color. The girl thought to herself what this is. She herself did not understand what had just happened. She asked Mr. Azent if it all seemed to her. And what kind of dress is she wearing? The man assured her that she should look around and see for herself. Isnelda followed his advice. It turned out that the eyes were focused on her. People oohed and awed. She said it was some kind of magic. One lady claimed that she was seeing a magician for the first time, and she praised the dress. The man asked who the girl herself was, suggesting that she was a magician of the Bantar family. He said it was a great debut. That man asked Roel how his father must have tried to arrange such an evening. The girls surrounded Xenia. One asked her if anyone in her family was a magician. The debutante claimed that she did not know about this. And Isnelda wondered what happened and how she changed her dress. She herself understood absolutely nothing. She also wondered, did Mr. Azent himself know what would happen? And he calmly drank champagne from a glass. Baron Bantar, surprised, asked his niece for confirmation that she was also a magician. He was surprised that the girl kept it a secret until now. She tried to say that she didn't know this either. He accused her of still pretending to be an innocent lamb. He assured her that she should have told him about her abilities. He asked if she wanted to destroy their entire family. The man was aware of this. That a magician is not just a goose laying golden eggs, it was a real gold mine. He couldn't believe that his niece had been hiding for 7 years. He realized that if he had found out about everything even later, he would have died in the wrong hands. He blamed her for planning to trick him. He voiced out loud that now that everything had been revealed, he realized that she wanted to escape. Now he understood her words about independence and self-sufficiency. He grabbed the girl by the shoulders, said she was like her father. His brother Argo also gave the family a damn laugh. The girl asked her uncle to wait. She insisted that she was in so much pain. He continued to shake the girl by the shoulders. The Baron's hand was grabbed by a hand in white gloves. The man let the girl go, and she was under the protection of Mr. Azent. The blonde asked if the Baron was sure that he had chosen the right time and place for such a conversation. But he angrily told the guest not to interfere in their family affairs. Mr. Noah noted that since these are family matters, they need to be discussed among the family. But it seems definitely not here. The head of the Bantar family asked the guest what he was talking about. His eyes were bloodshot from a fit of anger. Now all the guests' eyes were focused on the personality of the owner of the mansion, and their delight and admiration gave way to condemning glances and murmurs. The man only now realized his mistake and did not understand what to do now. He could not believe that he had behaved so indecently in front of the nobility. He turned around. His fists were clenched and shaking. He understood that everything was because of this bastard commoner Noah Azent, who was not even invited here, and everyone looked at him as if he had done something bad. But he considered himself a victim. Baron Bantar blamed the brat Azent for everything. If he had not appropriated the entire inheritance for himself, he would not have gone into debt. After all, if he had money, even if his business failed, he could have acquired a higher title for himself and provide a better life for Isnelda. If it weren't for Noah Azent, who stole 400,000 of his brother's inheritance from him. The Baron asked the guest for forgiveness, and he insisted that he would like to talk to Isnelda first. After all, this girl was silent all this time, which caused him immeasurable damage. Mr. Noah asked, "How much?" The Baron asked him again. Azent clarified the question. "How much do you estimate?" Bantar coughed. He didn't even know what to say. Mr. Noah insisted that the amount did not matter. "Whatever it is, Mrs. Nelda is able to pay for everything." The owner of the mansion asked what he was hinting at, and I already asked the girl if she could really hide the money. A blond man is decorously sipping a sparkling drink from a glass. The wall clock struck 9 times. Mr. Noah Azent said that in 3 hours it would be midnight. Then Mrs. Nelda will come of age and inherit all the wealth of the Crunch family. The ladies began to whisper. They wondered what could be inherited after 7 years. After all, everyone thought that the entire inheritance was transferred to the foundation. Mr. Azent explained. That scholarship funds are not just charity but long-term investments. He, of course, understood that the amount of funds would gradually decrease if they were owned by an ordinary person. But it wasn't like that with him personally. The Baron agreed with the speaker. He recognized that Noah Azent was one of the richest men in the country, surpassing even many aristocrats. But besides his wealth, he had one more feature. Not everyone knew, but 20 years ago, Noah was just a skinny orphan boy without a penny in his pocket. When asked who this boy was, Professor Argo replied that he was a ward of his foundation, and also his first student. He argued that it was very sad that orphans could not develop their talents just because of their origin or bitter fate. They were amazed at him, because the man himself had recently become a professor, and he has already founded a scholarship fund. Argo claimed that he enjoyed doing this. The man's body lay with a ritual blindfold over his eyes in a coffin, and the chairman of the fund was an orphan who had barely reached the age of majority. Noah stood at the tomb of his teacher. Then he had 400,000 and all the rights to the fund at his disposal. They said that this was impossible and assumed that he had changed his will. They whispered disapprovingly that the child would run the business. It was predicted that Crunch's fund would soon collapse. The woman asked Mr. Noah why he was refusing sponsorship. He replied that her husband had invested in the fund since its inception. Another lady claimed that many people did this, but not them. Argo Cruncha was a mage with a promising future, and they were all brought together by his genuine goodwill. The lady also said that the current state of the fund is depressing. After all, since he began managing it, the fund has become rotten and corrupt, that they participate in all private transactions and force children to compete. The current foundation now resembles a guild that only pursues profit. Noah Azent emphasized that the fund did not go bankrupt. The woman was surprised that this was the only thing that bothered him. She asked if he knew what people call him now. Mad Dog Crunch. The lady jumped up. People saw him on the throne with skulls, and at the feet of his feisty chained dogs. The lady in a fluffy lace skirt was walking away. She said she couldn't stand it anymore. She assured him that no matter what he said, he would not see their support. Soon the door slammed behind her. And now at the debut evening, Noah asked Mrs. Nelda in public, does she remember what was in the will that Mr. Crunch left 7 years ago? The girl claimed that her uncle had a copy, but she herself did not see the will. The man was holding that scroll in his hands. It said, "The seat of the president has been vacant for 5 years. At this time, his student Noah Azent will take office. All property will go to the president. If after 5 years there is any property left, the decision on its sale will remain with the president." The girl understood why everyone was so fussed on the day of the funeral. Isnelda clarified that there was a fortune left, but she didn't understand what it meant that she would inherit it. Noah began to explain what Mr. Crunch had told him, but he was interrupted. The Baron assured that all this was a sweet lie, and he knocked the scroll with the will out of Mr. Azen's hands. Isnelda was surprised at her uncle's actions. She asked him what he was doing. He sharply shouted at the girl to shut up. He couldn't believe that she fell for this blatant lie. The Baron said that according to the will that he presented, his niece would not receive even a coin from her inheritance, that he held on as best he could. He also sheltered the daughter of his now brother. The man was furious. He shouted that how dare he now show up and give the girl all the inheritance. The Baron stood in the middle of the banquet hall in full view of everyone and puffed with rage. Mr. Azent asked him if it was not enough for him. Roel, the Baron's eldest son, was horrified by what was happening. He, like no one else, understood in what light this commoner would present them now. And Mr. Noah Azent was strongly interested. Where did the payments go, not the maintenance of the girl?